it's a glorious cathedral. It's much larger than Baltimore or Mobile, and it is like Mobile on a prominent spot, on a square, on a green, which is today a prominent spot, Logan Square. So this is not too far from the City Hall, which is an amazing building with a really tall tower and a statue of William Penn on it. And the square really is a early 20th century development. So this is built in the 1840s, and it's really maybe 60, 80 years later that the square becomes a prominent place. But the Catholics had the foresight to build it on a prominent spot that later, you could say later architects or planners said, well, that's kind of neat, and that's a nice building. Why don't we develop that, and then why don't we connect that with a big boulevard at a diagonal, huge boulevard like in Europe, to a future Acropolis, which is their art museum. It does have columns on the front of it, but like many churches in Italy or in Europe, the columns are not a real porch. They're the impression of a porch. So it says welcome, says grandeur, says monumental, but it's not a full porch. So that's interesting. The tower was never built. Bell Tower was never built. And this one really is your classic Renaissance church. You go inside, it's not columns. It's not columns and arches. It's a wall architecture. It's a wall with square columns or pilasters. And it's broad. It's 50 feet wide. It's 80 feet tall in the nave. It's a very generous building compared to what we've seen so far. And then it's cruciform. And, of course, the cruciform is not an early Christian method of designing a church, but it's a medieval type. We think of Romanesque Gothic cathedrals as being cruciform. So this is a medieval idea that the Renaissance continued, and they put a dome at the middle of the cross. So it's a Renaissance church, not with columns, but with arches and with cruciform with the dome. And it's just a very sophisticated building in terms of, if you look at the interior, these large 35-foot pilasters, fluted, canthus leaves, very ornate, a lot of movement in and out. Then this vaulted ceiling with coffers. If you look at the ceiling and the dome, it's all coffered. It's all partitioned into small pieces. And this gives a richness. It's also good acoustically. And so this is very nice at the Cathedral in Philadelphia, Peter and Paul. On the left is the bishop's throne, the cathedral. On the right is the pulpit. And this is used at that time for preaching. And so, because the readings are done at the altar, and preaching is done there, and so you go up pretty high, maybe 6-8 feet above the ground, 6 feet above the ground, and it's all marble, so it's honorable, like the altar. And then the sounding board or the canopy above it is helping to project your voice out. So it's against the column. So one of the principles of projection architecturally is to have a wall behind you, helps your voice project, and something above you that helps your voice project out into this big, cavernous church. Interestingly, we think of the pulpit or the ambo where the word is proclaimed or the scriptures are read as being connected to the altar and in the sanctuary. But you'll find in many churches around the world earlier pulpits raised up high on stairs, and they'll be in the nave, or they'll even be halfway down the nave. People would gather around the pulpit to hear, and you see paintings of that, actually, of people gathered around an altar for the preaching. So getting close to the speaker, but getting them up high is important. And I still try to do some of these things as best I can in new buildings, that we want to elevate the person reading or speaking. And it's also visual. If you can see the person, you understand them better. And of course, it's giving prominence to the Word of God or to the preaching.